As much as I love the skill system in Duel Links, I will admit it did have pretty notable issues develop as the game progressed. Because skills were tied to specific characters, you couldn't build a deck guaranteed to be usable on everyone. So if you had to use some random character for a mission or to level them up for their rewards, you would have to design a new deck around the skills that character had if you had even unlocked any skills at all on that character. Another problem is that since skills are specific to characters, there could only be skills for cards related to anime characters' decks. This means that decks that did not appear in the show, like Lightsworn, could not get focused support and had to make do with less specific stuff like Destiny Draw. At least that was the case until this kit showed up. With the release of Seven's World, a new type of skill was released called an Archive skill. These skills mostly come from the card trader, only have to be unlocked once, and can be used by any character immediately. They mostly exist to facilitate pre-existing specific archetypes, but some are generally applicable, the most important being Destiny Draw Mystical Space Typhoon. This skill makes your next draw become a copy of Mystical Space Typhoon in your deck once you have met one of two conditions. The first is if your life points are lower than your opponent's by any amount. The second is if your opponent has at least 3 spell or trap cards currently in play. This does provide a guaranteed easy out to problematic cards like Shiranui-style Samsara, but overall the effect is a bit middling. So why is the skill so important, you ask? Voice lines. For the longest time, Atem was the only character in the game with access to a Destiny Draw skill. However, every character in the game has voice lines for using that skill. This is a Destiny Draw, and thus, you can finally hear all those voice lines in-game by just having those characters use this skill. It's a dream for people like me who check all the data mined information to see all this stuff actually show up in the game. Starting to move on to more specific skills, we have Spell Swap Fire Formation Tenki. It returns any Fire Formation spell in your hand back into your deck, then replaces it with a copy of Fire Formation Tenki from your deck. However, your summons are locked to Beast Warriors unless it's coming from the extra deck. This seems like specific support for Fire Fist, as the Fire Formations are their archetypal support spells, but several formations such as Tensu and the aforementioned Tenki work with Beast Warriors in general. Tenki can search them, Tensu gives them extra normal summons, all good things. Thus, the skill is decent support for any Beast Warrior focused decks, with predominantly being used right now for Ancient Warrior, granting them a very high level of consistency. From monsters that love spells to monsters that are spells, the next archive skill is a Pendulum skill, Fortress Bound to Shadow. During the end phase, if you have Tribute summoned a Kleeport monster that turn, you gain 800 life points for each monster you have tributed. If you somehow get multiple Tribute summons, it only checks that one is used for a Kleeport. You can still get the life points if your second summon goes to something like a Monarch. But this is a Pendulum skill, which means it also has an effect to reformat your field to include independent Pendulum scales. On what condition? No condition! And since this is an archive skill, that means any character can have independent Pendulum scales, at the cost of the skill doing nothing else for any deck but Kleeport. Kleeport, Ancient Warrior, all of these are decks that are already pretty good. What can these yellow skill things do for bad cards? Well, if you like Charmers, then I have a skill for you. Awakening of the Charmers can only be used if you have the familiar possessed versions of Hita, Ausa, Area, and Win in your deck, which are basically 1850 vanilla level 4s and impose no other summoning restrictions. For its effect, you reveal a Charmer or familiar possessed monster in your hand, then return any card in your hand back to your deck. You can then generate a copy of Awakening of the Possessed in your hand. This is a pretty decent card for Charmer decks, giving them protection and draw power for a lot of their monsters, in addition to adding some decent attack to multi-attribute decks. While you do have to play some bricky familiar possessed monsters, this skill can get them out of your hand, meaning if you just play the bare minimum 4 cards to meet the requirement, you functionally just get 4 copies of a pretty good card in Awakening. And since all the familiar possessed can be bought from the card trader, this skill is super accessible early on before you get cards to enable the more powerful decks using those gems. In more general terms, battle-focused decks with multiple attributes like Gladiator Beast would very much enjoy this, if they didn't already have a skill of their own. Domain of the Gladiator Beasts can only be used if you have at least 8 Gladiator Beasts in your deck. Your summons are locked to Gladiator Beasts, Beast-type monsters, and anything coming out of your extra deck. The Beast inclusion is to fit to the Test line of cards, which support Gladiator Beasts but are not part of the archetype. The payoff is being allowed to set a gladiator's rejection from basically anywhere to your field by revealing a gladiator beast in your hand, so this is just a free card. This means the value of the skill is solely on if its rejection is worth getting that much. So what does it do? Protecting your battle-focused monsters from getting blown up by effects and summoning more monsters for fusion material, that's what. It is fairly mission critical, though if you want to be silly or OTK easier, you can try running the Charmer skill, I can't stop you. From Fusion to Synchro, we have the case of the Stirring Mayakashi. You must have at least 12 Mayakashi cards in your deck to use this, which is over half the deck minimum, so no cheesy hybrid decks here. And your main deck summons are locked to Mayakashi or Zombie Fire monsters. I wonder what that's for. In exchange, this is one of those special skills that adds more cards to your extra deck at the start of the duel. In this case, Tengu, Gashadokuro, and Oboroguruma, the level 5, 3, and 11 Mayakashi Synchro monsters. Additionally, as a courtesy to people playing against Mayakashi not having to sit through endless synchro climbing, if you have a 1 Mayakashi extra deck monster on your field, you can dump 5 synchro monsters immediately to your graveyard, and unlike other times extra deck cards are dumped, you are allowed to summon them despite them not being properly synchro summoned. This doesn't give the Mayakashi player any distinct advantage, as Mayakashi's key tuner Daki can summon itself from the graveyard when you synchro summon and is not once per turn. This allows for climbing all the way up to the level 11 synchro, and into the deck's link monsters, but that can take a while to set up, so to keep up the pace of duels and duel links, this skill shortcuts the process. This is also why Mayakashi needs all the additional extra deck slots. It's expected to go through so much of it just to do their basic setups. I guess the idea of playing the deck without at least 10 cards in the extra deck was too haunting for the developers. Now here's a skill that proves just because something is generic doesn't mean it's not connected to a character. Tuning in the Sky. This skill supports the Agent archetype, which despite being a synchro deck with a skill available to every character, should be used on specifically a Zexal character, Tori Meadows. Tori has voice lines when using most of the Agent cards, as her Japanese voice actor took the deck to several major tournaments. Oh wait, right, effects and conditions. Your special summons are locked to only Agent monsters, Hyperion monsters, Synchro monsters, and normal monsters. For effects, you can dump 2 agents from your deck to the graveyard, then generate a copy of Sanctuary in the Sky in your deck, which is the archetype's do-nothing field spell, then optionally trigger a sub-effect. This sub-effect lets you shuffle a Hyperion or normal monster in your hand back into your deck, then add an Agent or Hyperion monster from your deck to your hand. Finally, as an independent additional effect, you can shuffle a monster in your graveyard back into your deck to turn up to 2 fairies on your field into tuner monsters. So what does that soup mean? It means that you can loop the Agent of Creation Venus and her endless parade of mystical shine balls super hard. Searching and dumping agents like Venus or Earth allows you to easily get the Orb Spammer into play. There are multiple vectors to put shine balls back into your deck so they aren't clogging your hand, and in fact can extend you further on topping of making Venus a tuner, allowing easy access to level 5, 7, and even 9 synchro monsters. And all of this on top of the ability for the deck's synchro boss, Master Flare Hyperion, to copy the Agent of Destruction Venus, which can recycle those shine balls all over again. Oh, and none of this was once per duel. You could use it turn after turn. This skill was insane. And yes, past tense, since this thing got nerfed hard. See, due to some specific wordings, this skill enabled some very unfun combos. Without a lock on the deck's normal summon, people were able to use Man Throw to FTK the opponent using the endless batting line of shine balls. If not that, then they would floodgate out the opponent by using Ancient Fairy Dragon to cycle Sanctuary in the Sky into Summon Breaker, a field spell that prevents more than 2 summons during the main phase 1, the only main phase in Speed Duel, and by using Master Flare Hyperion's effect to copy the effect of Celestial Nightlord Parshath and search Herald of Greenlight and stop any stray MST from destroying said Summon Breaker. With the nerfed version, every summon you do is locked, not just your special summons, and you can only send 1 agent monster from your deck to the graveyard instead of 2. Your extra deck must not contain any duplicate cards, you don't get a free Sanctuary, the bonus effect can only return Hyperions to the deck and can only search Hyperions or the Agent of Creation Venus specifically, and finally, you can only make 1 monster into a tuner rather than 2, and you don't shuffle back a monster for it. Some hefty changes to be sure, but well deserved, even if it left the deck floundering without a way to unbrick on shine balls. A recent change, however, literally implemented the day before I wrote this portion of the script, has allowed the sub effect to shuffle back a shine ball again, and remove the requirement that your extra deck is all unique cards, which is nice. After that headache, I can only think of one thing to say. Remember to click all the YouTube buttons. Okay, let's duel! The power of archive skills is a double-edged sword. Sure, decks that could never get their own skill due to never showing up in the show have a shot, but it also means that decks that did show up can have their skill put as an archive skill instead of getting a character, such as the unfortunate case with Constellar Union. This skill locks your main deck summons to Constellars, but allows you to ignore the tributes needed for their normal summon and ignore levels for their Xyz summons. You can also reveal a Constellar in your hand to send 2 Constellars from your deck to the graveyard, which is very good setup for cards like Sombre. All this seems very nice, so what's the problem? This skill should be exclusive to Dipper Orion. See, in the early portions of Arc 5, there are a trio of characters that use older pre-existing archetypes rather than brand new ones, and Dipper used Constellar. If this skill is an archive skill, that means Dipper has no plans to come to the game, since it would be really awkward if everyone could use a skill for his deck. And if one of the trio is missing, that means the other 2 aren't likely to be coming either, though I suppose that didn't stop Primo from leaving Lester and Jacob at home. But regardless of if Kit and Julia are coming, Dipper clearly isn't, or this skill would be on him. Which is sad, because that means there is less game to enjoy, and I enjoy Dipper's silly personality. It feels like I'm in a deep hole of depression. No wait, this is a trap hole. And it's full of carnivorous plants pretending to be anime girls. Of course. Well, at least this is a good place to talk about Traptrix's Ground, which you can only use if your main deck has at least 12 Traptrix monsters and your extra deck is completely jet black. Once per turn, you get to put a Traptrix from your hand onto the field for free. That's nice, extra material is always good, even if it can't trigger its summon effects. And once per duel, after turn 1, you can send a Traptrix or the related whole normal traps from your hand to the grave to... Ooh, add a copy of Treacherous Trap Hole to your deck, then search a Traptrix or Hole Trap, which can include the Treacherous that was just made. This card is in the normal card pool, but it's been hit on the ban list to limit 1, and due to how the Duel Links ban list works, that means you can't play any other limit 1 cards regardless of if they are more copies of Treacherous or not. But since this skill is not on the ban list, and the card it makes isn't in your deck during deck construction, you can put a different Limit 1 card in your deck and circumvent the ban list restrictions. It feels like I'm cheating to do this, as though I'm some sort of super boss with more power than... Oh no, not that music. Not that music! He's here! He's here! The one-winged Dark Lord! This skill locks your main deck summons to Dark Lord monsters, but will add Dark Lord Contact and Dark Lord Uprising to your deck automatically, which are the archetype's Revival Spell and Fusion Trap, respectively. The primary effect returns one of Capricious or Indulged Dark Lord from your hand to your deck, then replaces it with the other one, nice for sorting out your starter monsters. However, if only your opponent has a monster when you use this skill, you can search from the lineup of forbidden quick play spells instead. And by that, I mean the line of quick play spells with forbidden in their name, and not spells that have been banned on the ban list. This includes cards with the abilities of Monster Effect Negation, Spell and Trap Effect Immunity, and Unrespondable Mass Negation with the paywalled Forbidden Droplet for the true heartless angels among you willing to shell out that cash. This power may be strong, but now that Ixchel is about to be freed from her long capture on the ban list, a true reunion is at hand. All of the characters already share this skill. They will come to the call in time. Until then, farewell, and remember, I will never be a memory.